discovered a series in the realm of Local 58. A VHS archive of an ordinary broadcast company. Animal education, storm safety, space knowledge, artificial intelligence, and are among the topics presented to us in the form of short, educational VHS guides. Tonight, we will envelop ourselves within this fantastic educational series. This is Gemini Home Entertainment. Oh yeah. I'm digging this. On our plate tonight is an analog horror series by an internet creator named Remy Abode, birthed from an alternate reality gone awry. Containing events stemming from the hope for a brighter future, Gemini Home Entertainment is a video distribution company ready to take you on an educational trip through various avenues of life knowledge. What that knowledge is exactly is unclear at this point in time, but what we do know is that something in their reality is out of place. Something isn't right here. The series was born on November 13th of 2019 and has since built up to a total of 16 videos, each with their own surprises and each giving us a different piece of the puzzle as to what's happening within this world. The guides are presented in a VHS anthology format, a far cry from the silent onlooking and broadcast interruptions we experienced in Local 58. Whoever's behind Gemini wanted people to see this, and everything within each recording is as it should be. Tonight on our plate, we have the following before us: World's Weirdest Animals, Storm Safety Tips, The Deep Blue, Artificial Computer Learning, Our Solar System, Camp Information Video, Lethal Omen, Wilderness Survival Guide, Sleep Image Visualizer, Games for Kids, Advanced Mining Vehicle, Deep Root Disease, Monthly Progress Report, Christmas Eve Party, Home Invasion Help, and last but not least, Crusader Probe Mission. Because there doesn't appear to be any sort of established timeline here, we're going to tackle these in the order of their release date. If you can't tell by now, we've got our work cut out for us, so pop open those Lunchables and grab that Crystal Pepsi. We're about to dive into some analog horror. This, my friends, is Gemini Home Entertainment. World's Weirdest Animals. The video opens by showing a strange and wacky wildlife that inhabits various regions of Minnesota, like prairie chickens and burrowing owls. The overall pacing and layout of the video are pretty simple, with the names of the animals being presented alongside a couple facts, all over some calm B-roll footage. The overall tone changes a bit once we make it to the 3-minute mark. Contrary to the prior animals, the habitat for the one upcoming is denoted as everywhere. And if that weren't strange enough, Music is non-existent from this point forward, merely leaving us with an ominous dead air. And so, the next animal up is something called a woodcrawler. For the next couple minutes, the video explains a bit more about them, like the fact that they're found all over North America, are excellent hunters, do not make any noise at all, and prefer the homes of large families for nesting. Apparently, they adapt to this residential environment, although it's unclear what exactly that means. So, right in the middle of episode 1, we get a brief glimpse of what we can assume to be a woodcrawler. It appears to be some sort of long-legged creature, and I've got a funny feeling that its actual body is much, much larger than a human. Curiously, the video also presented somewhat of a paradox, claiming that you will hear screaming, but they stole their voices. If we're assuming that the victims of these so-called woodcrawlers are humans, then it leaves us wondering what exactly they're doing to them. Lastly, I find it interesting that this creature was described as nature's mockery, as that term could be interpreted in a couple different ways. Are woodcrawlers ridiculing our entire perception of nature and how life within it functions? Or are they some kind of absurd imitation of human life? I could be way overanalyzing this first part, but I'm just curious why that's there, considering how unnatural this creature looks. In this next scene, we're outside of that same house at night. It's hard to make out, but we can notice people inside of it this time. Why? Those aren't people, are they? So, with their bizarre, unnatural behavior, combined with a caption claiming that they're fake people, it's clear that woodcrawlers don't kill humans. They imitate them. This effectively establishes synonymy between the two, as their method of adapting somehow involves taking over their bodies and conforming, to the best of their ability, to natural human life. As we've seen though, their behavior is far from it. They are incredibly tense, they can't properly interact, and when faced with an outsider that isn't one of their kind, they attack them. They're an absurd imitation of the human form. a true mockery of nature. Storm safety tips. Brought to you by Harbinge Technologies. The focus of this video is to help keep you and your family informed on how to remain safe in the event of a major catastrophic storm. The steps outlined are pretty cut and dry, with the first being to reinforce your home by improving structural support, replacing roof shingles, and fixing leaks. Step 2 advises that you install an early warning system. Then, conveniently, Harbinge Technologies makes. According to the video, this albedo alarm will warn you ahead of time if a storm or other danger is approaching your home. Interesting. I wonder what that could be. The third step involves building a storm bunker, which should be precisely 18 feet long by 10 feet tall. The tape then advises us to install a 4 to 5 foot wide aluminum hemisphere and to place their timber shortwave radio next to it. We're given no further context on why it should be there, but it should. This next segment explains what to do during these storms. It's first advised to take our family to the bunker, followed by powering on our timber radio and remaining calm. Oddly, when these steps are shown, conflicting statements appear below each one that seem to add nothing to the table in terms of instruction. Rather, it tends to inflict the viewer with doubt, with claims like, "Your home doesn't belong to you now. Ignore all sound produced by the radio. They're auditory hallucinations." And "Your tears are filled with salt." If we took these statements away, we wouldn't be losing out on anything, which makes me wonder why it's there and who the hell wrote it. Listen, under your feet, crawling through the floor. It seems that this line is referencing wood crawlers, which leads me to believe that this storm isn't the type we know of in a conventional sense. This, combined with the immediate camera cut to lights in the field, alongside that warning to return to the bunker if we see them, makes it appear that these wood crawlers and whatever's emitting these lights are perhaps the same creature. With this in mind, this leaves us to wonder what exactly this storm entails. How often does it happen? And most importantly, why is it happening? Production Company. The premise of this one is simple. Lighthearted education about various creatures and regions of the deep blue sea. Towards the latter half of the video, we cut to a section about the deep ocean. The Marianas Trench is introduced as a large foreboding hole in the ocean floor, described as the deepest place on Earth. Following this, we can observe a cross-section view, introducing an even deeper and more ambiguous region of the ocean called the Demizia Tunnel. And, ominously, the depth here is unknown. Nothing can live inside the Marianas Trench. The same, however, can be said about the Demizia Tunnel. Taking what we know so far about woodcrawlers, how they were introduced, and the connection to them from storm safety tips, I'm led to believe that this creature is perhaps a full-body shot of one of them. With this, we become aware of their ability to exist on land, underground, and beneath the extreme pressure of the ocean floor, cementing them as a highly resilient creature that humans, by all accounts, need to stay away from. Regnad Computing, huh? This next entry involves a new, state-of-the-art AI tech showcase. The overview explains that it's been in development for about 4 years and is already highly advanced. Curiously, this is the only tape so far to start off with absolutely no music, which I found notable considering that in each video so far, the music stops when an ominous revelation is about to happen. The AI showcase is laid out in the form of short stories. Each iteration spans 4 lines of text, and as we progress through this video, we'll find that what starts off as unintelligible quickly morphs into something we're able to logically follow. As expected, this first story made little sense. We can gather an overall idea of what it's trying to convey through words like river, a secret, death, and the names Jack and Mary. Iteration 2 expands on this a bit, and reads the following. Jack leapt over the river. Mary followed close behind. They're searching for the secret place. I hear you. And with iteration 3, Jack leapt over the river. There goes Mary down the stream. The secret place will keep us safe. The river flows, but not with water. Alright, so that was a lot to take in. Those last two iterations diverted pretty heavily from the original story, formulating a narrative with tons of clues to pick apart. The story here surrounds two people named Jack and Mary. We can assume that they're out in the wild, leaping over a river to get to a secret place. It's unclear what this secret place is, but for now, we can assume it to be a storm safety bunker. In Iteration 4, we get references to a so-called voice from space, and in that same story, it's clear that Mary has become something else. This something else looks to be the product of the hungry eye that's referenced thereafter. However, by this point in the video, we're unsure of what exactly that is. Something else I found interesting was this small detail. At the beginning, we're told we're going to explore 3 iterations of short stories by this AI. In reality, we received 5. This leaves us with 2 options on why this is. Either an external party had tampered with the video or this computer, or this AI is somehow advanced enough to make decisions on its own. Personally, I'm led to believe the former, and this is why. As we could say, the structure of these stories takes place in third person. During iterations 2, 4, and 5, however, we receive specific lines of text that address either us or Jack in the first person. And after stringing these together, we gain an interesting result. I hear you. Jack, do you see me? I've become something else. Do you see the hungry eye? Here I am. With this context, I want you to listen very carefully to that last iteration once more. There is some sort of voice coming through the broadcast. It's extremely muffled, however it's clear that something is either interfering or feeding information to this AI. And personally, I'm led to believe that it's Mary. She and Jack are not just filler names for these stories. They are actual people, and I'm going to infer that the story presented actually happened. Moving on, towards the video's end, we observed a glitch in the 2 diagrams. Given the references to the voice from space and the moving stars, I'm led to believe that these 2 circles represent planets. The larger appears to be the hungry eye, being denoted as alive, with intent. It seems to be hyper-focusing on a smaller planet, which we can assume to be Earth, and in the second diagram, we can observe the effects that this eye is having on us. Somehow, it's projecting some sort of vessel down to Earth, and once it makes contact, it mutates into the creatures we've been seeing thus far. It's clear that there's something larger at play here, and there's a lot of context that we're still missing. So let's keep this in mind and press on to see what else Gemini has for us. we shift gears to our solar system, we're able to learn a few facts about the various planets. A diagram greets us, encompassing the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. After learning facts about the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, we then make our way to Earth, described as one of the only planets in our solar system capable of supporting life. Upon making our way to Jupiter, the video highlights its big red spot. It claims that it's not an eye. It is an open wound. We then observe Saturn. The outer portion of its ring is absent, and it's denoted as something called the Gateway. The iris is new. It's with us now, laughing at us. It's clear that the overarching threat is not that of woodcrawlers, but the iris, which has somehow caused neighboring Neptune to mutate. What exactly that means at this point in time is unclear, but if I were to guess, it could be some sort of breeding ground for the creatures it emits by solar storm. Due to its presence, other planets like Jupiter and Saturn are beginning to suffer from the effects of its influence. And given the story so far, it's safe to conject that its next target is Earth. Tape 6 changes gears a bit. Here, we're introduced to a freshly reopened campground called Moonlight Acres, a serene getaway that's completely isolated from outside civilization. The tape showcases its many accommodations and activities, including hiking trails, archery, canoeing, and their flagship Lights in the Sky event, which is oddly denoted as a harvest. Afterwards, we're able to catch a glimpse of their various structures. Among these are burrow-free family cabins, kids' cabins, and even their original rustic cabins for those feeling a bit more outdoorsy. Each of these are beautifully decorated to ensure your stay is as cozy as possible, and you can rest easy knowing that they have alarms in place in case a sudden storm takes place. Just be absolutely, positively sure not to... Do not answer the knocking at the door. Around 3 minutes into the video, we're introduced to the mythology behind Moonlight Acres. Allegedly back in the 1930s, strange, well-dressed men would visit the campground, asking to enter the admin's cabin every single night for years. Apparently one night, a deal was made with them and they left, never to be seen again. Following this, we get a mention of skinwalkers that were allegedly sighted during the same time period. For those unaware, skinwalkers are a type of shape-shifting humanoid creature that's able to inhabit the form of any animal they desire. It's unclear if they're referencing the same type of skinwalker within Gemini Home Entertainment. But with what we know about woodcrawlers and how they function, I definitely see some overlap. Adam Levitch, Barry Johnson, Truman Michaels, Bethany Newman, Alec Davison, and Dorothy Bates are listed as vessels. Carriers of something that isn't good. It's clear to us that the knocking was coming from woodcrawlers, and given the photo of them, we're able to finally establish a scale for how gargantuan these creatures can be. I'm going to conject that the woodcrawler we saw in World's Weirdest Animals was much younger than the ones we're seeing here in Moonlight Acres. While we're currently unsure of what their lifespan is, we know that this one surely wouldn't fit into a house. Given the campground's mythology, with the stories about the strange men that coexisted with so-called skinwalkers in the 1930s, this implies that these creatures have been here for decades. But this leaves us to wonder what they've been doing and how they've upheld the status of mere campground mythology for so long. We know the original staff opened their doors, likely being killed or transformed into fake people and resulting in the campground's original closure. But where the hell have they been since then? What is clear is that Moonlight Acres is back open, now advertising burrow-free cabins and having a clear awareness of these creatures existing. Someone gave it the green light. But who? Wilderness Survival Guide. In this one, a man named Jack Wilder is going to teach us about wildlife. Fitting name and familiar. The video opens informing us about various safety measures to take place when out in the wild. We learn which equipment to bring and are then presented with various natural hazards to be aware of, like thorns, ditches, various animals, and what to do if we ever come face to face with a bear. There's our skinwalker. So we now know that woodcrawlers can not only kill and inhabit the bodies of humans, but animals too. Interesting. Following this section, we're greeted with numerous flora and their impacts on humans. Among these are poison ivy, which causes rashes, itching, swelling, and blisters. Water hemlock, which causes trembling, convulsions, respiratory failure, and death. And lastly, something called nature's mockery. Not the woodcrawler description we saw earlier, but the actual, proper nature's mockery. Its effects on humans encompass hallucinations, sudden muscular paralysis, body disfigurement, and flesh decay. In other words, something that can latch onto you, something that can break you, deforming you into a being hardly resembling that of a human. But, hey, at least it won't kill you. One of the most disturbing and unethical aspects of this video was the description of a human pleading for help. Clearly, they were desperately in need. However, the video plays it off, persuading you that this human being that's probably on the brink of death is nothing but an auditory hallucination. Knowing what we know about fake people and their conformity to human life, I understand that this could very easily be one of them. But what if it isn't? We're presented with a catch-22 here. If we risk our own life to help this person and they're not a fake person, then we've done something good and helped save a life. But if we assume that it's a fake person without ever confirming it, we'll never know any better and they'd be left to die. It's a tactic of manipulation. Gemini Home Entertainment has planted a seed in the heads of whoever watches this, and it effectively contributes to a moral apprehension, a panic per se, in which you truly cannot trust anyone. Moving on, we then learn how to create a fire. Critical knowledge for anyone venturing into the wild. If your fire fails to start though, Jack Wilder advises to And so we have Exhibit A fake person screaming for help. Like bait. Welcome to Lethal Omen, a video game intended for Regnat computers. It takes place at Moonlight Acres, and throughout this video, we're able to observe the embodiment of various motifs we've seen in videos past. The beginning of the game starts out serene. The player peeks around the campground a bit, however is soon greeted with an enemy mob that are out to get them. Interestingly, these enemies appear to be dressed in military fatigues, giving rise to the possibility that there's some sort of military intervention at play here. It should be noted that there have been absolutely zero references to government involvement thus far. However, given the circumstances, it would make sense. Keep this in mind. We'll come back to it. Anyway, a few moments later, we encounter what seems to be a fake person. And afterwards, the campground alarm begins blaring. The game tells us to run. That, my friends, is what takes place during a storm. Panic, disruption, invasion. It appears to me that the basement we sought refuge in followed every single protocol that Harbinge outlined back in Storm Safety Tips. The dome was there and the radio was on, but that didn't stop them. Like breaking through cardboard, a woodcrawler was able to breach their advertised fortress of refuge with ease, which leaves me curious if Harbinge made their guide in good faith. If we can recall, there was a double purpose to their video. Not only were they giving advice, but they were also selling products, like the timber radio and the albedo alarm. From an outside perspective, they appear to be capitalizing on mass panic to reap profits, although that point is merely conjecture since, for all we know, they too may be oblivious to the inefficacy of their products. The blind leading the blind, per se. Alright, I know this is a video game, but if the Iris can move around the solar system at will, coming within a critical distance from Earth, then yeah, there's a problem. And it ain't just woodcrawlers. Interestingly, this section occurred at twilight, which mirrors the various other references in the knocking. If there's something I take away here, it's that it seems that these creatures are more active, more violent, when the sun goes down. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you can actually play this. Lethal Omen is a game chock full of secrets. You can spend a solid hour exploring Moonlight Acres, discovering its hidden lore, and unlocking each of the 5 endings awaiting you. I'm going to go over them now, so if you'd like to play this for yourself and keep things unspoiled, I'll give you 10 seconds to skip forward to this timestamp. Like we established, within Lethal Omen, there are 5 different endings to uncover. Before we get to those though, I want to bring you into the campground to explore the hidden lore awaiting us. We begin the game next to a highway outside of Moonlight Acres. Both ends of the road are blocked off, however we can observe 2 cars nearby, one out in this field, and another resembling a police car. We're tasked with collecting 3 keys, and after doing so, we're then granted access to the campground. One of the first things you'll notice is this bulletin board. It contains 2 notes and 2 strange images that are hard to make out. The first note informs us of the Lights in the Sky event taking place tonight at 9:30 p.m., and the second informs us to bring our so-called SIV. Moving inward, we're then greeted with 6 cabins. In the first, we can observe headphones, a shortwave radio, a TV, and a Gemini Home Entertainment VHS tape. In the second, we get much of the same. This time though, a stack of tapes containing storm safety tips and other Gemini media are present. However, there is this one that I'm unable to make out. In the third, we can observe a TV playing a Gemini tape. Here, we learn that an SIV is something called a sleep image visualizer that we're required to plug into a module, and that same SIV module can be seen lying on the dresser. Given the name, it seems that the SIV's goal centers around recording dreams. For who, how, and why, we're currently unsure of. But, interestingly, if we shoot this specific monitor, we're able to observe the SIV in action for Adam Levitch, the former men's club supervisor that we know was transformed into a vessel. In cabin 4, we can see that things are a bit messier. On the TV once more is that SIV tutorial, and scattered across the room are numerous SIVs and headphones, along with the tape labeled Albedo Alarm Settings Video. Moving on to cabin 5, we can observe a huge mess. There isn't much to this one besides this SIV on the ground. And last but not least, cabin 6. This one has clearly been ravaged by something, evident by the large break in the floor. Within it, we can observe that SIV tape, along with the SIV module and some sort of strange plague surrounding it. Upon making our way back outside into the archery area, we're greeted with 7 targets, along with our first enemy encounter. After taking them out and approaching the targets, we're able to read snippets of articles about the events taking place at Moonlight Acres. Campgoers distraught after Moonlight Acres' famous Lights in the Sky event is abruptly cancelled. If you've been looking forward to the Lights in the Sky event this year at Moonlight Acres Family Camp, don't be so hasty to pack your bags. The official Moonlight Acres website recently updated, revealing that the event has been abruptly cancelled with no reason given. Campgoers are enraged, especially those who go to Moonlight Acres every year simply to watch the event, and demand an explanation for the abrupt cancellation. The Times asked Moonlight Acres for an interview. They politely declined. The others partially covered, making it a bit harder to make out, but it seems to focus on the disappearance of a person named Jordan Barnes. They were most likely Canadian, and given the fact that this note is beneath the one about the Lights in the Sky cancellation, we can assume that this is why. Investigators are curious, though, as to why so many are worried about their disappearance, pondering if they're victims of a so-called mass hysteria. Moving on, once we make our way to the administrator's cabin, we can observe numerous campground photos covering the walls. The first, amusingly, contains a Mario 64 reference and displays an aerial view of the campground. Mario 64 reference and displays an aerial view of the campground. The second shows the campground entrance from 1982. The third is a swimming pool, circa 1988. And the fourth is a camp staff group photo taken in 1984. On the far wall are numerous other camp photos that are unlabeled, and opposite this are shelves full of VHS tapes. Here we can make out various Gemini videos. However, this specific one bears a name and date. Given what we know so far about the SIVs and how they operate, I'm led to believe that this might be an archive of numerous staff dreams. Further inside, we find a shelf full of TVs and a strange door that's floating on the wall. Upon making our way up to it, we encounter an unkempt attic full of discarded televisions, and on the floor beneath them, various notes, reading the following. It was looking into me. Wants to eat the camp. I fear the men may return. My face is going away. I hear voices. The spot on my neck has grown. There's a bonfire tonight. I'll stay in my bedroom. Lights in the skies tonight. I've been told that the men will be present. Maybe it will leave us alone now. Something that stood out to me here was the reference to the spot on their neck. It seems to allude to an infection that is slow moving, and there are absolutely zero references to woodcrawlers or any sort of creature. Given what we know so far about nature's mockery, it doesn't seem to be that either, which leaves me curious if there's another form of infection taking place here. Something biologic. Moving on, If we make our way back outside and head leftward, we encounter what I assume to be Nature's Mockery, and within it, a heavily deformed human being giving us a visual as to what this plant actually does to you. While examining it, the fake person we saw back in the commercial gameplay spawns in, and then we're told to run. And so, like we saw earlier, we make our way back to the bunker, and from here, everything plays out as shown before. Well, except that. And so, this time, we hear a fake person screaming in the distance. And we come to find that they're infected with the same plague we saw on the cabin floor. It's staring into you. From here, we're going to explore the other 4 endings. Clearly, Lethal Omen's lore is gargantuan, leaving us with tons of questions that we're currently unable to answer. I'm curious what else there is to find though, so let's head back in to uncover it. Moving on to ending 2, you once again begin the game as usual. Collect the keys and fight the enemies. However, this time, instead of approaching the Nature's Mockery abomination, you gotta make your way back to the admin's attic. Once you're inside and turn around to exit though, you're greeted with a strange mannequin that tracks your every move. And after approaching it, you observe the following. To unlock ending 3, you need to collect the keys, kill the enemies, and approach Nature's Mockery. This time, instead of making your way to the cabin or bunker, you're required to pass through this secret entrance to the family cabin area to claim this hidden key that's also covered in that plague. After obtaining it, you make your way back to the front, where you'll find this target that you've got to shoot. And after doing so and heading to the highway the campground lies on, you encounter an abandoned police car before the following plays out. Ending 4 involves us making our way back in. After After taking out the first round of enemies, we're required to shoot each target before making our way back to the entrance. Curiously, we then find an opening in the tree line, and upon exploring it, we encounter a massive, foreboding hole that's also covered in plague. Upon approaching it, we can hear the sounds of creatures in the distance. And of course, we do as any sane person would do and jump in, giving us our fourth ending. And last but not least, the true ending. Here, we gotta do everything we've done prior. Keys, enemies, mockery, plagued key, and heading back to the front. Curiously, we then see an opening in the fence line, and after approaching it, we encounter a group of enemies in a formation. This time though, they're not out to kill us. They're waiting on us. But that isn't everything. The game continues. We approach a tree with a sign. Shifting tendons shape anatomy. There are fewer livestock now. And another. Wretched hands tap my window. A stranger's fangs scrape the walls. And another. The floorboards creak while I sleep. Growing cracks leak with red. The field has eyes, burning deep. They are becoming restless. The mannequins, the hole, the police car, the ritual, and the iris. There is a ton to unpack within Lethal Omen, and the beauty of it is that when presented in a video game format, you're left to encounter these on your own. So let's recap. The role of the mannequins seen in the attic ending is currently unclear. It's important to note that they appear to have a much higher polygon count than anything else found in Lethal Omen, but aside from that, hardly any context is given regarding their existence. If I had to guess, I'd say that they represent the strange men that the camp admin referenced in their note. If we can recall, right after reading it is when we encounter them for the very first time, leading to a potential connection between the two. However, this is hitherto unconfirmed. Moving on to the hole, this appears to be the byproduct of woodcrawlers, their breadcrumb trail as they breach the confines of Earth. It's currently unclear what exactly that plague is, but perhaps we'll find our answers in later uploads. The police car seems to represent a victim. The police likely received calls of strange activity going on at Moonlight Acres, potentially involving the missing Jordan Barnes. However, after investigation, they never made it out to reveal the truth. There is a looming impression that they're aware of woodcrawlers, but this is also unconfirmed. And lastly, the ritual, an embodiment of helplessness. After realizing that everyone around you is infected, is a fake person, you lose all hope on fighting back. Police can't help you. Camp admins answer the door, but they can't help you. The bunker that's supposed to keep you safe, that can't help you. And a supermassive sentient eye is looming over you. It goes without saying that in a situation like this, fighting back is futile, and the game communicates this by waiting on you. Get in, they beckon. Give in.
We'll return after these messages.
Alright, halfway there. You still with me? As we can see, there is a lot going on with Gemini Home Entertainment. We still have tons of questions about the overall story here, but I wanted to circle back and recap on what we know so far. Refill your drink, heat up another popcorn, and get cozy, because you and I are only getting started. In review. Within Gemini Home Entertainment, the entire story revolves around the Iris. We know the Iris is a supermassive sentient planet that entered our solar system without humans ever knowing it. When, how, or why it did is currently unclear, but what we do know is that it infected the neighboring ice giant Neptune, turning it into something that is alive. Neptune has become somewhat of a minion to the Iris, a vessel, or lens, that it uses to emit solar storms targeting Earth. Given the diagram from artificial computer learning, we can infer that within these solar storms are embryos and seeds that mutate into woodcrawlers in nature's mockery upon landing on Earth, the Iris's next target for mutation. Back home, the primary prey of woodcrawlers are humans, but we know that they're able to inhabit the bodies of animals as well. Woodcrawlers are highly resilient and clever, given their ability to imitate humankind, although it's still unclear what exactly they do to achieve this. On top of woodcrawlers, nature's mockery is introduced as the major flora to steer clear from, and its method of infection appears to be via direct contact. Somehow, at an unknown speed, this plant paralyzes and disfigures whatever it comes into contact with, leaving the victim in a vegetative state forever. At this point, we're currently unsure if nature's mockery eventually kills you. But even if it did, that's not much better. Within the camp information video, we catch wind of the mythology behind a campground called Moonlight Acres. Given that the strange knocking men existed at the same time as the so-called skinwalkers in the 1930s, I'm led to assume that this campground was among the very first establishments to encounter the effects of the iris. This explains why every single original staff member died. Well, except the admin. They weren't listed. This point leads us to Lethal Omen, an archaic video game that cements the time period for Gemini somewhere in the 1990s. To me, the game seems to place us into the shoes of that admin, taking us through their final minutes within their desolate campground. The various endings seem to be symbolic of the many ways they could have died, but that true ending, the hopeless suicide and transformation, that is the one that killed them. Lastly, we have two characters, Jack Wilder and Mary. Admittedly, Mary's background has been elusive. We can assume that she mutated into a woodcrawler somehow, and have also made the tenuous assumption that she's trying to communicate to Jack through the Regnat computers. Regarding Jack, he's a recurring character throughout Gemini Home Entertainment. Obvious references are made in the Wilderness and AI videos, and given the nature of his work as a wildlife videographer, it leaves me to wonder if he has more to do with these tapes than they're letting on. If we can recall, World's Weirdest Animals, Storm Safety Tips, and Wilderness Survival Guide all have strikingly similar shots of video. So if he's the one behind these, clearly being attacked in the very first video, we're left to wonder what happened to him. Where is he? And so, alongside the abstruse nature of Jack's role here, there are still tons of questions left unanswered. Why do these tapes start off ordinarily, but devolve into a disturbing mess? Do each of the companies that Gemini Home Entertainment distributes for have humanity's best interests in mind, or is there something larger at play here? What exactly was that plague we kept seeing in Lethal Omen? Why are there stockpiles of Civ recordings in the admin's cabin? How exactly do woodcrawlers infect humans? Is the majority of humanity aware of this impending threat? And most importantly, why did the iris enter our solar system? We know it's there, but we don't know how it operates and what its overarching plans are. What we do know, though, is that Gemini Home Entertainment is aware of all of this. They know about woodcrawlers, nature's mockery, the plague, the deaths, and Neptune's infection, but coincidentally, we know the least about them. Clearly, there's a lot of context left to fill, so let's buckle down and see what else Gemini has in store for us. Well, perfect timing. For video 9, we once again meet our good friends over at Harbinge Technologies. This time, they're presenting an instructional guide on how to set up a sleep image visualizer, a device in which we can assume to give us a look into the dreams of others. We begin by orienting ourselves with the Civ module and headset before we move on to learn how to set it up. Interestingly, throughout this video, we'll soon notice anomalous interruptions that have been recorded over this tape. So, in the middle of this video, we observe it cut to the dream sequence of a Levi Jacobs, and within it, we witness our first mannequin character outside of Lethal Omen. No further context is given to why they're there, but curiously, right after this dream sequence, we can observe that same mannequin head being used to represent a Civ client. Let's recap real quick. Levi Jacobs was asleep for 4 minutes. Adrian Gordon was asleep for 4 minutes. Jack Dean, however, was asleep for 3 days. Alright, so throughout this one, we received 2 references to the Iris. One being in the Goodnight sequence, and another being within the dream of Joseph Allen, who never woke up. Interestingly, the video is very matter-of-fact in claiming that these images do not represent reality or the future. However, it's clear to us that they do represent the circumstances they're living in. Now, backing up. We've seen the name Jack in the series twice so far. Firstly in Artificial Computer Learning, and most recently in the Wilderness Survival Guide. His last name is different in this one, but for brevity, just know that this is the same person. Over on the Gemini Home Entertainment YouTube channel, they posted this image around the same time the Civ video released. On the very bottom, we're able to see his full name, and to the left, we can make out bits of the story surrounding him. According to the article, Jack is a prominent TV personality and wildlife expert. He had gone missing in May, and his disappearance has been the subject of a nationwide manhunt. He allegedly disappeared while filming a new special aimed to protect and enlighten what I'm assuming to be people from what are most likely the effects of the Iris. Curiously, the month he went missing and the time period he underwent Civ testing are both one and the same, which leaves us to wonder if, perhaps, this 3-day slumber somehow led to his death. While that is currently unclear, what is clear is that Jack Dean's Wilderness Survival Guide and the World's Weirdest Animals videos are distinctly connected. 2 parts of the same series of videos by him. With this in mind, we know he's been in the Civ, and we also know that he's been attacked by fake people. Either of these could have killed him. So which one was it? where is he? Next up on our list is a family-friendly guide made by an Optica Video called Games for Kids. Are you bored? Need some new, fun games to play? Well, you're in luck, they claim. And so we learn about the ins and outs of various games the kids can play. First up, hide and seek. Simple enough. One player's the seeker, and the rest are hiders. They count to 20 and go on the hunt. Next up, freeze tag. One player is it, while the rest are runners. Third up, sardines. The sibling to hide and seek. One person hides and the rest go seek. Fourth up, a game called Well, that's new. Contrary to every bit of advice we've gotten in videos past, like staying quiet and following the lights when the sun goes down, are all thrown out the window. We know that wood crawlers and fake people are more active at night, and advice like this does nothing but ensure their demise. Unless that's the point. so Feed the Woods, a game that unequivocally leads children to their own death. As we could say, during this section we observed numerous camera shots of the forest. Interestingly, in the third one, we could observe this strange red light in the sky. It seems to match the eye that we've seen on woodcrawlers, and given the nature of this game, it would make sense. Clearly, the woods are a threat, a sort of eldritch location that serves as a breeding ground for these creatures. And as with anything that is alive, they need to feed. Backing up, I wanted to highlight the creator of this tape, a company named Optica Video. Considering the name, combined with the addition of a game that quite literally kills children at the benefit of these creatures, I'm led to assume that Optica Video is not a kids company at all. This is a manipulation tape with nefarious intent, and it also drives home the point that the woodcrawler's food source is drying up. With this notion in mind, let's think back to Moonlight Acres. We established that it was ostensibly ground zero for the Iris, the very first location in which humanity experienced the effects of it. Given what we know from Lethal Omen about the Lights in the Sky event cancellation and the disappearance of Jordan Barnes, we can speculate that perhaps Moonlight Acres is or was closed during the time this tape was made. The woodcrawlers are hungry, leaving them with no choice but to expand to the neighboring forest to inhabit and feast on animals, which, as we learned from the camp admin's note, also began to dwindle in numbers. It's here when we realize that they're scraping for anything they can get, and this is further evident by the shot of the woodcrawler devouring the police car at the video's end. Whoever's behind Optica Video isn't someone inherently good. They're helping them, leading us, for the very first time, to question the morality of Gemini Home Entertainment as a company. With Regnad, Harbinge, and Geneva, there was, at the very least, ambiguity in their ethics. But here, that's not the case at all. Next up on our journey is a tape named Advanced Mining Vehicle. Here, we're introduced to a Canadian organization called NAMAD, or Northern Alberta Mining and Development. The video begins by introducing us to a new, revolutionary piece of mining technology called the Remote Operated Compact Tunneler. As the name implies, it provides the user with tunneling capabilities while mitigating all risk that would otherwise be involved. The video then informs us of the various technologies present within the ROCT, like an optical zoom lens to focus on important details, a compact microphone to detect running water or nests, and even an altimeter with a heads-up display so you're always conscious of where and what the ROCT is tunneling into. Following this, we learn of the heavily protected, industrial-grade battery aboard the ROCT. And it seems like we're gonna need it, considering it's been spotted by something. We then cut back to the ROCT's camera at a depth of 145 meters. Interestingly, spread throughout these caves are some sort of fleshy, stringy substance that we haven't yet seen. So here, we observe the ROCT tunnel into what appears to be a woodcrawler nest, which are later referred to as gardens. The deeper we go, the more infested things become, which, combined with the phrase mutation of the heart, leads me to believe that these creatures are infecting and mutating Earth somehow from the inside out. The purpose of the red flesh is currently unclear. However, we can postulate that it's some kind of artery for the woodcrawler's crops. Whether those crops are the woodcrawler's offspring, nature's mockery, or something else entirely is also undetermined. However, we know that something is being propagated beneath the ground floor. Video 12 is an educational film brought to us by the Warner Area Department of Health. In this one, we're going to learn about a condition known as deep root disease. The video is split up into 5 sections: roots, contraction, bulbs, diagnosis, and sprouts. In the roots section, we observe an obscure illustration of some sort of growth. We're told that roots begin to form from the underside of something called bulbs, and as growth progresses, its speed accelerates. Furthermore, its base swells as growth continues, resulting in the surrounding area becoming discolored. With this newfound context, we learn that this disease is biologic, driving home the point that this first illustration is taking place underneath the skin's surface. We learn that it progresses rapidly, and after making contact with bones, is able to spread freely. What exactly its effects are is still unclear. learn how to contract DRD. Here, though, the subject is, strangely, doing absolutely nothing. Straight off the bat, we can make the connection between deep root disease and the spot on the camp admin's neck. And given what we know from Lethal Omen and the player character's transformation in the suicide ending, I'm definitely seeing some correlation here. Alright, so deep root disease, a somatic condition that, given the ending, appears to spread via direct contact. This video is pivotal because it breaks down a prior assumption about how these human transformations actually work. We initially assumed that woodcrawlers inhabiting victims' bodies were the only way they created fake people. However, in this video, we learn of something entirely different that ultimately results in the formation of new bones and shifting tendons. It goes without saying that this alludes to a human-to-woodcrawler transformation. The process seems to start slow, but rapidly takes off the longer you have it. With this in mind, I wanted to back up to the camp information video and highlight this section about the former camp staff. As we can recall, they were labeled as vessels. When we first got to this point, we were unsure if this was a reference to fake people or something else. However, I'm really beginning to think that these two terms are synonymous. With deep root disease, it is something entirely different. It's a sickness, a plague, spread by direct contact with someone infected. It's this affliction that ultimately results in your untimely transformation into a woodcrawler, leading you to become one with them and gaining a primal desire to hunt, inhabit a vessel, and spread DRD to the next unsuspecting family so they can become one too. So, in short, fake people are gutted and inhabited by woodcrawlers, and due to this notion, they likely don't suffer the effects of deep root disease. On the other hand, deep root disease infects humans, creating new bones and turning you into them. A cycle of life, per se. monthly progress report. Our third venture into the world of Regnat computing. This one opens by introducing us to various Regnat staff, along with the project name for their AI technology. Following this, they take us through their major advancements through 4 sections: computer processing, predictive advancement, failure avoidance, and ACL communication. In the first, we learn that Regnat graphical capabilities have drastically increased, resulting in the ability to create 3D models like the ones we've seen in Lethal Omen. In the second, we learn of a breakthrough in their predictive advancement technology, which, given the name, seems to give insight into future events. Here, Regnat claims that its capabilities will soon allow their PCs to surpass every competitor within the next year. In Section 3, they tout their successful avoidance of technological failures. They credit this breakthrough to the so-called support and wisdom from their client, but who this client is currently unclear. And lastly, in the final section, they inform us that all communication between Regnat and their client have been recorded from the Artificial Computer Learning Monitor Room. That recording is as follows. For the past 3 minutes, we observed the AI tech in action. Given that this time we have a grander outside perspective on how things work and allows us to formulate some key points. For one, we can see that the Regnat computers are becoming infected with the sprouts we saw in Deep-root disease, hinting at the possibility that this mutation can spread through some medium of analog transmission. 2. We realize that they're on iteration 1417, meaning that they've nailed down communication to an art. 3. We understand that the ACO module feeds the client a prompt, transmitting it through various antennae on the outside of the building. And 4. The client, which is presumably of Iris origin, is responding, effectively opening a line of communication between humanity and these creatures. Now, at the end of the video, we observed Regnat's eagerness to meet their client, meaning that they're well aware that they're communicating with something. This is not an artificial intelligence, and these stories bear stark references to what we've seen from Gemini so far. In iteration 1417, we can observe that the prompt is Earth, with the response given, reading. Mary sees the gateway die. Sleeping ones are eaten whole. The vessel floats into the maw. The jaw unhinges. Now, this could reference one of two things. Either we can take it literally, assuming that woodcrawlers eat people like the vessels we saw in the camp information video, or we can take this symbolically. The line Mary sees the gateway die seems to allude back to Saturn and its rings. Given that they seem thinner than usual in the Our Solar System video, combined with the fact that it was referenced as the gateway, perhaps Saturn is in the way of sorts, unknowingly suppressing the Iris's influence on Earth. It's withering away, and at the very same time, the threat of the Iris is ever growing back home. It wants to mutate, to consume everything, and this vessel we all live on is inching closer and closer to its demise. The next prompt is Moonlight, with the response. New things roam the feeding grounds. The harbinger guards in vain. Mary hears a creaking sound. The hungry eye is welcomed. Admittedly, this one's a bit more ambiguous. Could be referencing fake people as the new things that are more active at night. However, that's ultimately up for debate. What is clear is the term harbinger, which clearly alludes to Harbinge technologies. A harbinger is defined as a person or thing that announces or signals the approach of another. In other words, exactly what Harbinge Technologies is doing. This line drives home the idea that this client is aware of their existence, and so too of the inadequacy of their products. This explains why the woodcrawler was able to break in so easily in Lethal Omen. Their guidelines don't work, but they're none the wiser because they probably followed them too, and died. Lastly, with the references to Jack, we can assume that he mutated. When this happened is still unclear. However, we can postulate that it just might have been when those fake people attacked him. And so, with the way things are going here, I don't think Regnat's onto a breakthrough. Any sane person would pull the plug on this project. However, they're pressing onward. I know this won't be good. Christmas Eve party. I love those. Here, we're placed into a 1985 Christmas Eve party at Moonlight Acres. Things start ordinarily, and the party seems lively. The sun's going down though, and we all know what happens then.
Everyone knows.
And so we get our first look at a distinctly different creature to a woodcrawler. Whatever this is incredibly large in size, with some sort of tentacles protruding out of its body. And like that wasn't enough, we then learn that this abomination is Mary. This video is interesting because it presents a contradiction. Mary Dean was listed at the beginning as a videographer. However, at the end, she is completely transformed to this. We know that deep root disease gains speed after it gets to your bones, but damn, I didn't realize it was that fast. This leads us to assume that Jack and Mary entered the Christmas party normally. Mary's affliction was likely at a very late stage, and she probably figured she could power through it. With this, the outside shots are potentially filmed by her as she stepped out to get some air. And while out there, that is when her transformation finalized. I know it sounds like, and could very well be a stretch, but I'm struggling to find an explanation for why this is. What is certain, though, is that she isn't a woodcrawler. She's as foreign to us as woodcrawlers are to them. And now we see what that mentality feels like. Home Invasion Help, an educational guide by our good friends over at Optica Video. The video begins by explaining how stressful home invasion can be, and reassures their viewer that this video should ease that. We're then told a couple points to be aware of, like the fact that windows and doors are the most common entrances during a home invasion, and that locking them can slow a threat. Following this, it advises us to install a security system, including cameras, motion detectors, and alarms, all of which can be disabled by blunt force. It's clear to us that this tape is not for the homeowner, cementing the fact that Optica Video is not a company of good. Interestingly, we now know the method of entry when woodcrawlers create fake people. Incapacitation, followed by entry through the proboscis, or in other words, the nasal cavity. Now, quick side note. The reference to the proboscis is interesting because it's not something inherent to human beings. Interestingly, we also saw that woodcrawlers perceive humans as what appear to be mannequins, and perhaps their interpretation of a human nose is a proboscis. I don't know, could be a stretch, but that's what I took from it. Following this, we're now outside of a home. This handheld camera footage seems familiar. Let's see what they find. It's funny, going back to the beginning of this video and rereading everything with this new context really paints things in a different perspective. This video never referenced homeowners. It was always ambiguous. So, throughout this home, we can observe the red fleshy substance we saw back in the garden. Furthermore, we can notice that same material sculpted into the shape of humans, with one of them clearly being alive. This is deep root disease in its most critical form. This family's house is clearly infested with woodcrawlers and likely has been for a while. Alongside this, the disease was possibly all over their house without them knowing it, and after contracting it and having it run its course, we now see exactly what it does to you. Furthermore, as we can recall from monthly progress reports, these deep root sprouts are able to grow anywhere, giving us a visual cue and warning of places to avoid. We can also notice how these people can't move. Much like the plagued NPC at the end of Lethal Omen, they're frozen, likely in their final moments of infection before their final transformation takes place. You're left in a vegetative state, unable to move, unable to feel, unable to speak. But there's a catch here. A few videos ago, we postulated that woodcrawlers do two things: spread DRD and inhabit the victims' bodies, which we now know is through their interpretation of a human nose. We never really entertained the idea of wood crawlers inhabiting the bodies of people already infected, which is what I believe is happening here. Their skin is gone, and we're witnessing what otherwise would be taking place inside of their body if they were fully intact. With this in mind, these people are now likely coexisting. One version of them are fake people out in the wild somewhere, but the real version, they're infected insides. Well, that's what you're looking at. And so we make our way to the 16th and final video of Gemini Home Entertainment. Brought to us by Geneva, a ship named Crusader 5 has returned from a decades-long mission after photographing Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. So, unsurprisingly, Crusader 5 has encountered the Iris and its many moons, and all of them appear to be fleshy, deformed, and alive. Interestingly, we also observed two moons being fused together by an organic force, cementing the fact that the Iris's influence is abundant, affecting more than just planets. Oh yeah, and Neptune's fucking missing. Alright, so this final video was a lot to unpack, but I'm gonna do my best to line it out. So here, we observed the inside of the iris, something that is unsurprisingly full of every cornerstone of a sentient being, with arteries, muscular fibers, and even what appear to be egg sacs. Before we get to what we saw at the end though, let's back up and establish what exactly this Crusader mission is. As we could say, it began in June of 1982. If the Moonlight Acres mythology is anything to go off of, then we know that the iris arrived in the solar system decades earlier. With this in mind, we can infer that this mission was reactionary. It's likely that astronomers noticed something happening with Neptune, with strange anomalies and movement not physically possible. And so, they launched the Crusader to venture out, take photographs of only Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, and report back with their findings. As we saw, the first stop was Jupiter. Here, everything was normal. The moons were there, Jupiter was there, and everything checked out. Upon moving to Saturn, the planet seemed okay. Crusader 5 then photographs 3 of its moons: Titan, Iapetus, and Chiron. Interestingly, Chiron doesn't actually exist, but the Crusader was still able to get a shot of it. It gets even weirder during this brief cut, in which we can read that the Crusader actually only photographed 2 of them. Anyway, moving on. We then make our way to Neptune. This segment only spans 2 months, and that's because Neptune is gone. During its hunt for this missing planet, it comes into contact with the various moons of Jupiter, Uranus, and Saturn that are all completely out of place and out of orbit. And following this, it then encounters the source of the problem: the iris. It's here where it's sucked inside and begins to photograph its interior. We then make our way through the esophagus and spine before approaching what the video calls its conscious mind. While inside, we then observe numerous scenes on Earth, including a DRD-infected person standing over a bed in early May, and either a transmission module or structure from Regnat Computing in late October. It's here where I'm led to believe that we're witnessing things through the lens of the iris. Somehow, the Crusader was able to link into its mind, observing the visual input that it's been processing. And finally, at the very end, we lose signal. The Crusader goes offline for 7 months, and from here, we can assume that it was then ejected somehow and made its way back to Earth. Well, either that, or it's still inside the iris. And the iris is the one making its way to us. And there we have it. 16 videos, chock full of disturbing lore, hidden secrets.
La cerveza más fina. To truly embrace the fine life, you must learn to let go. Only then will you find that even if you leave the beach, it never leaves you. Bienvenidos a la vida más fina.
Engrossing narrative surrounding 4 animatronics that were assembled for a burger. finest analog horror. Old school, rough around the edges, and by every account, disturbing. What if I told you there was a series out there that's recently stood out to me as one of the creepiest that I've ever covered on this channel? What if I told you that it's nearly neck and neck in quality with the revered Local 58 that we know all too well? And what if I told you that tonight we're going to be pressing through that very series while dissecting its secrets and piecing together its grim lore? Well, as you can tell by the title and length of this video, that's because we are. Enter The Walton Files, a show birthed on April 26th of 2020 by an online creator named Martin Walls. Inspired by the hit indie classic Five Nights at Freddy's, combined with a clear love for analog horror storytelling, Walls has crafted an insanely engrossing narrative surrounding 4 animatronics that were assembled for a burger restaurant named Bond's Burgers. The place opened in 1974 and was known to host birthday parties, school events, and even animatronic concerts for the public. Was known to host these things because, due to a few specific incidents, Bond's Burgers is no longer open for business. You see, The Walton Files is structured through just 3 videos at the time of writing that each contain numerous tapes, jumping back and forth between the day Bond's Burgers first opened in 1974 and 8 years later in 1982. A mysterious person named Anthony seems to reside in each video's description and claims that these tapes were all made by an extinct company named Bunny Smiles. Now, Bunny Smiles is somewhat at the foundation here, the Fazbear entertainment of this entire ordeal, and the root of nearly every event that takes place. Deception, curiosity, loss, trauma, and regret have all found their home as cornerstones of this series, and ultimately leave us questioning what exactly is happening with the Bond's Burgers restaurant and who had started this chain of events that ended up going so terribly wrong. As you can tell by the length of this video, this series is gargantuan, with a disturbingly convoluted story that reflects that. It's something that's fascinated me for quite some time, so I'm incredibly eager to press through this side by side with all of you. So, without further ado, let's dig in. From the top, The Walton Files.
This is a compilation of tapes created by the already extinct Bunny Smiles Company. I tried to get as much info as I could about what these tapes are, but all I could find was that they were handed to new employees back in 1974 to 1979, and the rest of them seemed to be recorded by a new facility caretaker in the year 1982. Hopefully I can find more soon. Anthony.
Company Introductory Tape, Archive 1, 1974. Serving as the pilot episode for The Walton Files, the first archive within this company introductory tape understandably takes a more direct initial approach at introducing you to the main cast.
And yeah, that's all it is. Just an ordinary employee training video.
Hi, and welcome to the introductory tape to your new job at Bunny Smiles Incorporated. You have applied to a job in technical support and maintenance. What does this job particularly mean? It means that you, amongst other employees, are the one who will take care of creating a magical and fun experience for Bond's Burgers.
As we've established, this first employee training video seems to have been created sometime in 1974, or applying for a job in technical support and maintenance, and so far, it seems legit. After this brief introduction, The video goes forth to introduce us to the Bob's Burgers main animatronic characters that make up a group called the Showstoppers, consisting of the eponymous Bon the Rabbit, Shaw the Lamb, Buzu the Ringleader, and Banny the Other Rabbit. The four lovingly perform a couple songs for us before we get into the nitty-gritty about what our new job actually entails.
Animated band made by BSI to entertain children. As a technician, you'll be given the role of a facility caretaker. Around this fun and magical journey we'll work on certain tasks, such as cleaning protocols,
Robot maintenance and repair.
and learning how to use BSI technology. But first, here's a message from Jack Walton and Felix Kranken, our beloved founder. Which reads, in BSI, the most important thing to us isn't the money or the rating. The most important thing to us is that you have a wonderful experience while working with us. That being said, with the Bob's Burgers restaurant getting opened in a few weeks, we're looking forward to achieving this dream with you.
Alright, hold up. 1975, closed for good Bob's Burgers restaurant. This video seems to have cut to an information catalog from a year later, giving us some insight into the fate of Bob's Burgers. Before we get to what's new though, I wanted to back up and highlight something that stood out to me. That photo of the founders seems oddly uncanny. I can't quite put my finger on it, but with Jack Walton especially, something definitely seems off. Anyway, that catalog houses a ton of information and context, and appears to read the following. Save, Restore, Secure. The BSI storage facility, also known as K9, is a company project to storage all valuable items from the closed-for-good Bob's Burgers restaurant. Given the situations about the incidents inside the 1974 Bob's Burgers location, any type of props, animatronics, and arcade machines will be carefully moved, inspected, and secured inside a bunker located deep down in the St. Juanes forest for good. A facility caretaker will take care of securing the facility and keeping it safe and working properly. Considering the fact that the initial role of the facility caretaker was to keep the restaurant clean, maintain the animatronics, and to learn BSI technology, I find it strange that they're now in charge of securing this top secret facility in order to keep it safe. Honestly, seems like a pretty damn big job, and it leaves me questioning what they're keeping it safe from. If that's what they're doing, that is. Archive 2, 1979. Here, we're presented with the children's cartoon created by a Sarah Evelyn. It's titled Bob's Super Sleepover and appears to convey a night where Little Bon the Rabbit had invited each animatronic's younger counterpart over for a night of movies and fun. Initially, everything seems fine. However, when the narrator begins running through the guest list, we're promptly informed that this cartoon is not what it seems.
For this sleepover, he invited Shah, Buzu, and Billy. Let's check again in case we don't forget any guests. Bon invited Shah, Bozu, and...
Hey, Jack, is that you? How are you, buddy? Good to see you. I didn't see you there, buddy. So, this definitely didn't help the initial uncanniness of the original Jack Walton photo. Clearly he, or someone he knows, has inserted his face into these tapes, leaving us to wonder why this was done. After this, we get back to the main story, which involves little Bon eagerly prepare the movie for everyone to watch. Weirdly, the VHS has that same creepy Jack face on it, and when it actually starts to play, the TV merely shows the text, "Let me out of here." Interestingly, if we take a look around the TV set, we can notice something suspect. A pill bottle with the name Sophie Walton written on it. This will be important later, so let's keep this in mind. Later on, everyone heads to bed. We're able to observe each character snoozing away. However, little Bond seems to be awoken by something, making noise in the middle of the night. Alright, so it seems that little Bond glitches into a cartoon depiction of Sophie Walton, the girl whose pills we saw earlier by the TV. As we could see, when she lit the lighter, Bond appeared behind her, looking as if he had a massive hole in his chest. Furthermore, we can observe that Sophie's dressed up in some sort of work uniform with a name tag that seems to resemble the one we saw earlier. This hints at the potential of Sophie being an employee of either Bond's Burgers or Bunny Smiles Inc. Considering the fact that she seems to be Jack Walton's daughter, then it would make sense. Another thing I'd like to highlight was that missing poster, which confirms two things. One, that the image from earlier during the guest list indeed was Jack Walton's distorted face. And two, that something happened to him, leading someone to litter his photo throughout these tapes. Also, while the missing poster date is illegible, the captions confirm that the date reads June 11th, 1974, meaning that his disappearance occurred during the same year that the Bond's Burgers restaurant opened. Could this have been the incident that caused its closure? Considering that he was one of the two founders, it honestly wouldn't surprise me. Archive 3. Taking place just after midnight on October 10th, we're heading down a forest trail. It's hard to make out on the video itself, but the person filming this can be heard in the background saying the following.
So, this is the brand new caretaker for the old Bunny Smiles facility. I'm recording this because the company requires some type of archives for the work history, something like that. I honestly have no clue because I just started working here. I'm going there right now, but they gave me this weird location that's somewhere in this forest to work at. And I've been driving for 20 minutes, and I can't find the place.
About a minute and a few video cuts later, they eventually make their way to that canine bunker. I'm not entirely sure why they have him working during the ass crack of night, but hey, let's hope they're making some overtime. Anyway, upon their arrival, they venture inside and observe the following.
Chris told me this place had been working since about 78, 79, somewhere around then, and that was 4 years ago, I think. So chances are it's going to smell horrendous.
I can't feel anything. He thought I was her. Brian's paralyzed. He isn't dead. Yet. He thought I was her, though. Is he referring to Sophie? Considering that she seemed to be dressed up in a work uniform that resembled Brian's, it would make sense, but that then leaves us wondering why. Why would Bond seemingly awaken and react so violently, mistaking another employee for what we can assume to be Sophie Walton? Why was he programmed to do this? Backing up to the beginning of that scene, we can overhear Brian talking about how the facility wasn't open for 3 or 4 years. For that entire length of time, the bunker was derelict and abandoned, banished to Mother Nature and forgotten. Interestingly, once he made it inside, we can recall that he made a passing reference to something called a relocate project that he claimed Bond would be good for. It seems that after this long hiatus, someone at Bunny Smiles made the call to open K9 back up, which I find a bit strange considering that the information catalog had claimed that it would be closed for good. For what reason they're reopening it though? I couldn't tell you at this point. But what I do know is considering the fact that Bond had chased Brian out of the facility, eventually catching up to him, mangling his entire body, and leaving him for dead. This so-called relocate project just might be the worst idea that Bunny Smiles has ever had. At least, as far as I know.
You're unbelievable.
Applebee's mozzarella sticks are just 50 cents for a limited time.
You're so unbelievable.
Now that's eating good in the neighborhood.
This is another compilation of tapes from Bunny Smiles Incorporated. I was able to contact people via forums and threads that have some information on the company. These tapes revolve around some relocation project that was being executed during the late 1970s. A BSI ex-employee mentioned that the tapes were really private and only a few people had copies of them. Once the company vanished in the early 80s, all tapes regarding the project were banned and destroyed. These are super rare, and I'm really lucky to have them.
The Relocate Project. Archive 1. July 2nd, 1978. The footage opens up with an informational segment about the closure of Bond's Burgers and the purpose of the Relocate Project. The same narrator that voiced the company introductory tape is back and seems to be eager about the future of Bunny Smiles Incorporated. Oddly though, if we look closely during this segment, we can notice bits and pieces of visuals that don't quite fit in. Have a look.
Hello, BSI members and employees, and welcome to the tape that will change the future of the Bond's Burgers brand and the Bunny Smiles Company for the better. That's right, after 4 long years of legal paperwork, we finally decided to use our backup plan, which we created after the tragic closure of Bond's Burgers back on July 20th, 1974. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present to you the Relocate Project. But before we go into details, we want to greet all the new Bunny Smiles employees. With the company greeting out of the way, let's start analyzing the Relocate Project by checking what has happened ever since the closure of Bonds 4 years ago. As many of you might have known from previous tapes, our beloved entertainers were safely secured in St. Juana's storage facility some months after the restaurant's closure. Later on, a a good amount of business opportunities appeared, such as books, merch, animated movies. We even got a TV show. That's when Felix Kranken had the brilliant idea of restore and reprogram the robots of Bond's Burgers with the purpose of relocating them in a new restaurant that would be opened in a not-so-distant future. A pretty smart plan, right? Making enough money to eventually reopen the Bond's Burgers restaurant is no doubt a brilliant idea. So let's give it up for Felix Kranken, a man with not only a giant brain, but also a giant heart.
So clearly Jack Walton sunk his little tendrils into this tape as well, interrupting what seems like a self-aggrandizing segment about Felix Kranken. Admittedly, this does appear to be symbolic, especially when we consider the fact that, earlier, Felix was labeled as the founder, singular, with Jack cropped out of the original photo that the pair had taken together. To me, this notion combined with the aforementioned 4 years of legal paperwork makes it seem like there might have been some bad blood between the two after this so-called incident that occurred back in 1974. Further supporting this is the fact that when the Bond's Burgers merchandise is being shown, we can spot a VHS about the disappearance of Jack Walton hidden behind the others. And if we head back even further to the file section, we can spot something a bit odd. You see it? It's cut off and hardly legible, but the words on the file box appear to read, "Jack's still here." Seems a bit deliberate, doesn't it? Given that these were so-called internal company tapes, that means that someone within Bunny Smiles knew something they probably shouldn't have when they were putting this footage together. So what actually happened to Jack? Considering the fact that the Relocate project appears to have been in planning since sometime in 1975, merely a year after his longtime friend and business co-founder went missing, to me, Felix Kranken is beginning to seem more and more suspicious as time goes on. Jumping forward a month, we're greeted with what appears to be an internal company tape regarding animatronic reprogramming. Banny appears on screen, and for this example, is used for these tests. The video initially shows their mouth opening and closing, with captions claiming that this is a so-called pre-relocate feature that requires checking since reprogramming could have affected this. Afterwards, they move on to a new Relocate project exclusive, which involves blinking. Ominously, the captions claim that employees would always need to keep their eye sockets clean, which I find odd considering that they're mechanical. With what we know so far about Bond and what he did to Brian Stells, I do wonder if Banny's alive per se, in the same way. Anyway, after this brief test sequence, a distorted face becomes overlaid onto Banny's head, implying that they're either representative of a human counterpart or that someone's locked within her somehow. Once this brief section passes, the video cuts to a top-down view of what appears to be the inside of Bond's Burgers, showing Banny helplessly trying to escape.
Get out. The mighty rabbit needs to 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 get out. The rabbit is starving. The rabbit is starving. The rabbit is starving. The rabbit is starving.
The bunny rabbit needs to get out. The bunny rabbit is starving. Starving for what? At the end of that entire sequence, we were greeted with a shrouded missing persons poster. After brightening it, it doesn't appear to be Jack's, but that of a Susan Woodings. The missing date's hard to make out, but it appears to be on the 30th of June in 1974. So, 2 missing posters and 2 animatronics that appear to be alive. so we make our way to the new, updated, and revised technical support tape made specifically for the K9 facility. Shaw the Lamb is our host in this one, and states that she'll be taking us through an orientation and area tour inside the bunker.
Welcome to Technical Support. Today we will focus on the area tour and orientation inside K9, the Bunny Smiles storage facility. We recommend all facility caretakers to have all needed equipment in hand and to always wear the Bunny Smiles uniform. But most importantly, all of you must always, under any circumstance, use your BSI ID card. Once you have all the necessary equipment at hand, we are ready to go.
Barring how uncanny Shaw's mouth movements are, this small section confirmed that the costume that Sophie was wearing back in the introductory tape was indeed a facility caretaker uniform. Let's keep that in mind. The next segment takes us outside of K9. We make a quick check for all the necessary equipment for the job. A lantern, snacks, a key, and a camera before we make our way inside. Once we do, Shaw begins to annoy us because,
wow, it's pretty dark here. You should turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the light. Turn on the... It's important to keep track of which rooms you enter. This place can be really tricky and you could get lost very easily. This is the resting room. In this room, you can sit down, rest, talk with coworkers, you name it. Remember to always keep this room as clean and organized as possible. A clean environment helps to get tasks done faster. A dirty environment only makes your job harder to get done.